All right, so welcome to another Brainworks Education lecture video, or rather a class video. So today we're focusing on topic 7 of civic education. We're beyond our halfway point. And I actually want us to focus on drugs and drug abuse and the systems that are in place in Zambia that exist to combat drug abuse. So I want to mention that a substance or substance abuse can actually be referred to as illicit drugs. So you can have over-the-counter drugs. You can have drugs that are medicinal in nature, or you can have drugs that have certain effects on the brain. So all drugs have something called a mechanism of action. That mechanism of action can be therapeutic, meaning it can be used to alleviate pain or cure certain illnesses, or sometimes it can be hallucinogenic or a depressant or a sedative. So there are various ways in which drugs interact with the body's physiological system. So substance means any material or a type of matter. That's what a substance is. People use substances for various reasons. So I do not like these explanations. However, substances can be abused, like illicit drugs. And remember, there is, who said that? There is Paracelsus said that there is one difference. The only difference between a poison and a remedy is the dosage. So anything can actually be a poison. Even water itself can be a poison. Okay, so let's move on to the classification of substances. These are where your essay type of questions can actually fall into, like you maybe even MCQ types of questions. So you have to know the classification of substances. And let me just mention this now. All these substances can either come in solid, liquid, or gaseous form, like aerosols. So you can inhale a substance, like certain people like to inhale some form of glue of some sort. So illicit drugs or illicit substances can either be solid, liquid, or gas. So the first category of substances is over-the-counter substances, sometimes referred to as over-the-counter medication, because when you are taking these drugs, you can even buy them from any retail shop. Even ShopRite can sell Panadol. So these are things that do not need a prescription from a doctor. So examples, aspirin, Panadol, and by the way, please, antibiotics are not over-the-counter substances. But in Zambia, anyone can get azithromycin or amoxicillin over the counter. Do not abuse antibiotics, because there is something called antibiotic resistance, such that in an event that you really need the antibiotic, it's not going to work because the bacteria has gained resistance to that particular type of antibiotic. So only take antibiotics when they've been prescribed by the doctor and the sample has been taken to the lab, and the labs actually say, all right, this person has this type of bacteria. Then the lab will also do a drug susceptibility test to see which antibiotic is going to actually be the most effective to treat that specific bacterial infection. So we have controlled substances. Controlled substances are also called illicit drugs. So these are substances which can only be obtained if one has a prescription or a special authorization. So controlled substances, you need like a prescription. These are now proper drugs that have been referring to, for example, morphine, which is a very, very strong opiate, which is like which is a very strong opiate, or an NSAID, which is like a painkiller. And also other substances like Valium. Remember, prescription drugs, malaria drugs, antibiotics, antiretroviral drugs, and then there are illicit substances. So things like Valium, morphine, cocaine, pethidine, and marijuana are called controlled substances or illicit substances. You need a very specialized license, and they are usually used for research purposes. Okay, so two types, right? You have got controlled substances and over-the-counter substances. So these are the categories, the two categories of substances. One is illicit, one is not. They should actually be three. So the first one should be over the counter. The second one should be controlled, where you require a prescription. Then the third one is actually supposed to be illicit. But according to the notes and the syllabus, you know, ECZ usually follows things to the tip in terms of social sciences. So follow those two categories. So classification of substances according to their chemical nature or effects on the user. So this is now the physiology. When I say physiology, is how does that drug interact with the body's hemostasis. So the body usually likes to be normal, but if you take a certain illicit substance, you're going to experience certain bodily changes, and those bodily changes and effects and signs are called physiological effects based on the mechanism of action of the drug. So the following are some of the examples. So some of the some drugs tend to have an effect on the nervous system, and they're actually going to have an effect on mood, and they're actually called depressants. So these are substances that can slow down the action of the nervous system. You're going to find that someone's speech can deteriorate. Someone can have a slow gait. So when I say gait, it's a manner of walking. So a slow, sluggish sort of gait, sort of lazy, euphoric state. And usually alcohol is an example of an antidepressant. And what's this? Mancrax are examples of depressants. So certain drugs will actually have an impact on the nervous system, where they'll start to increase your heart rate. After they increase your heart rate, your eyes, your pupils are going to dilate. You're going to be in a hyperactive state. So those drugs are called stimulants. This stimulates the central nervous system. They spread up the body. They speed up the body processes. This is not a good explanation, but it's okay. So the most common stimulants are caffeine. You know, coffee is a very good stimulant, and any other thing that is high in sugar. So sugary treats like chocolate, because they are going to dump a lot of glucose in your body, and your body is going to be in a very hyperactive state. Other stimulants include cocaine and nicotine. If stimulants are taken in large amounts, they become depressants and they slow down the central nervous system. So every person's receptors has a threshold limit. So overstimulation is actually going to make those receptors non-responsive to the stimulus, even if you actually increase the dosage. So receptors are not being activated. So the opposite thing is going to happen. You're going to enter into a depressive state. Some drugs make you see things that are not there, hear voices that are not there, and these drugs are called hallucinogens. And the best example is psilocin mushrooms, you know, those magic mushrooms, as well as LSD. These two drugs are usually the most common drugs that can actually give hallucinations. Sometimes even marijuana, but marijuana is usually associated with a heightened state of euphoria, a feeling of pleasantness and happiness, as opposed to hallucinations. But mushrooms, the psilocin mushrooms or magic mushrooms, as well as LSD, have the ability to cause hallucinations. So depressants, stimulants, hallucinogens. Then you have got your narcotics or your opiates. I think I mentioned these types of drugs. These are the ones that are actually used to treat pain. And sometimes people actually get very addicted to these drugs that can actually reduce pain, because other than reducing pain, they put the individual under that drug in a state of euphoria. So euphoria means a state of heightened happiness. So you just be in a zone where there is no pain, you're just chilling there. The pain is taken away, but you're also happy. So that's what narcotics or opiates do. And a lot of people have become addicted to opiates and narcotics. Others have even died of an overdose because of opiates. A very good example is morphine. If you want to think about a strong narcotic or opiate, think about morphine, if you want to know one example. So like I said, certain drugs can be solid, liquid, and gas. So definitely you're going to have a category of illicit substances called inhalants or solvents. Sometimes heroin is even taken as a solvent, where it's being injected directly into the bloodstream. So these are substances found in household products such as glue. I did mention that. Deodorants such as perfume, sprays, and fuel gases. So mostly the things that are usually abused mostly is glue and fuel gases. Once inhaled, the capillary surface of the lungs allows rapid absorption of the substance. It enters into the brain because the brain also, there's something called the blood-brain barrier, because the brain has cells and those cells actually need oxygen. So oxygen has to be able to diffuse through the brain. And if you are inhaling something that's gaseous, it will be able to cross the blood-brain barrier into your central nervous system and cause all these intoxicating effects and cause a high. So no wonder people get addicted to these inhalants or solvents, especially the inhalants, because of their ability to cross the blood-brain barrier. So substances and their effects. So the following are the effects of substance abuse in our society today. We use substances such as alcohol, tobacco, solvents, inhalants, and drugs, which can be dangerous if abused. So let's now try to individualize these drugs one by one and talk about their effects. So I'm going to start with alcohol and localize it. So let's talk about Zambia a lot of people drink alcohol, mostly because, it's good for being social. It helps sometimes people with anxiety, but sometimes it can make things worse. It might not be the best thing to take. So moderation is key. So alcohol, don't start a sentence with a small letter. English grammar, remember? So alcohol. So in Zambia, beer is taken on many occasions, such as leisure, initiation, traditional, and wedding ceremonies. Though only adults are allowed to drink alcohol. Alcohol is a pure colorless liquid present in drinks such as beer, wine, and brandy. So alcohol is actually an organic solvent that is, it's not necessarily, anyway, it's clear and colorless, present in beer, wine, and brandy, as well as certain whiskeys, depending on the method of fermentation and distillation that you use to actually produce that alcohol. Certain medicines are coupled with alcohol functional groups so that they can be easily soluble in the bloodstream. No wonder this sentence states alcohol is also taken for medical purposes, for many medicines contain a small percentage of alcohol. Alcohol is abused when one takes too much and often. So it's also called alcohol use disorder. So it may not actually be often, but it can also include a certain category of alcohol use disorder called binge drinking, where someone says, I only drink alcohol on the weekend, and then on the weekend they just overdo it. That's also categorized as alcohol abuse. So this sentence has to be expanded. It's not just too much and often. We also have to take into consideration of the binge drinkers. If someone, no wonder certain people can actually have bursts of acute liver failure and die. So if someone starts taking something regularly and cannot stop, that person is said to have an addiction. So that's how you form unhealthy habits. Literally, addictions are simply unhealthy habits that form a very strong behavioral change that's very hard to run away from, or to eliminate, or to stop. An alcoholic is a person who is addicted to beer drinking. Alcoholism is a severe and dangerous condition caused by physical dependence on alcohol. It impairs physical as well as mental health. So something becomes an addiction if that individual does not function well in society. If they stop going to work, they start having chills, then that means that individual is actually very much addicted to alcohol. The strength of any alcoholic beverage depends on the percentage concentration of ethanol, the given volume. So you can maybe say 450 mils or 250 mils of this alcohol contains 5% ethanol by volume. For example, this gives you a list. You people that drink know what we are talking about. Wine is very lethal. It has about 12 to 20% ethanol percentage per volume. Whilst the lagers are a little bit lighter, you need actually a little bit more lagers to actually increase your blood alcohol concentration to intoxicating levels. So let's actually now talk about some of the effects of alcohol. All right, so let's actually now look at some of the effects of alcohol. Hopefully there will be some positive effects of alcohol, like helping to treat anxiety disorders. Okay, so increases blood pressure and heartbeat. So at the beginning, usually, remember, alcohol has the ability to act as either a stimulant or a depressant. So actually, alcohol in small concentrations becomes a stimulant. Then as you continue taking it, you start experiencing that depressant behavior, like sluggish walking, impaired speech mechanism, impaired sight. So it increases blood pressure and heartbeat because it actually starts off as a stimulant. It impairs judgment, so it leads, some people can actually be prone towards violent behavior. Negative effects on the brain. This is a very open statement. It shouldn't even be here, but we'll put it there. Causes cirrhosis, liver cirrhosis, but this is very, very extreme because the liver is a self-generating organ. It has cells that are called Labile cells. So Labile cells have the ability to heal and repair and regenerate themselves. So for someone to have cirrhosis, it means they are really, it's inflammation of the liver. So it means the liver is damaged beyond its ability to repair itself. Clinical features, this causes loss of appetite, abdominal discomfort. You can't see this word. Abdominal discomfort. Makes one feel warm when one in reality is losing heat, leading to hypothermia. So shivering, hypothermia is shivering, when you're feeling very cold. Distorts perception. Remember, it affects the central nervous system. So it distorts perception of time and space and affects the sight, causing one to have double or multiple visions. And this is when now your blood alcohol concentration has actually gone so high that even your vision is impaired. I think that should be a sign to stop drinking, when your speech and vision are impaired. But some people drink as if, it's the end of the world. So causes withdrawal. So a condition called delirium tremens. So if someone has delirium tremens, someone is shivering, it means they've actually reached the state of alcohol abuse or addiction, if you start feeling withdrawal symptoms. So let's talk about tobacco. Tobacco that contains this interesting substance called nicotine, which also has the ability to bind to hemoglobin. So this is a substance that is commonly abused. A lot of people take cigarettes. It contains nicotine, tar, and carbon monoxide, which are harmful, which are very harmful to the body. The emphasis on very harmful. If it's something that you have to stop doing, that's way worse than alcohol is tobacco smoking, because one of the two cancers that have been linked with a cause is one, cervical cancer, which is linked to human papilloma virus, HPV, and lung cancer, which is actually directly linked towards tobacco smoking. So what are certain substances that are found? So nicotine is a colorless harmful drug. It acts as a stimulant and speeds up the transmission of nerve impulses if taken in very small doses, very regularly. No wonder it's nicotine that actually acts as a stimulant, and it actually increases your blood pressure. So people who have got high blood pressure and they are smoking, they are actually digging their own graves. So carbon monoxide is the gas that's going to combine with the hemoglobin. And when it combines with hemoglobin, it's going to form carboxyhemoglobin, which has a very low affinity for oxygen. So you'd find that carbon monoxide and oxygen will be competing for binding sites on hemoglobin. So your partial pressure of oxygen is going to go very low, and you won't be able to breathe well. So you end up having something called hypoxia. Just your oxygen concentrations will be very low, and it's very bad. And then the tar is the one that actually is very sticky, very carcinogenic, increases free radicals in your body, and it just causes a lot of things like emphysema, it makes bronchitis worse, and it will eventually start causing irreversible cellular damage to the lung cells, leading to someone having cancer. Okay, so let's look at some of the effects of tobacco smoking. So bronchitis, which is similar to an asthma attack, where your lungs are very constricted. So you can breathe in properly, but you'll be failing to breathe out. Then emphysema is where, think of it like a deflated balloon. You're just blowing that balloon, but it's failing to inflate. So that's what your lungs will be experiencing. They will be so porous, they'll have so many holes in them, such that when you breathe in, your lungs will fail to inflate. So it's sort of opposite with bronchitis. For bronchitis, you can easily breathe in, but breathing out is the problem because the vessels constrict, or the lumen of your airways constricts. But with emphysema, your lungs are sort of like a balloon with holes. When you try to breathe in, the lungs won't inflate. So heart disease, remember, high blood pressure causes direct heart disease because of the high blood pressure present in nicotine. Cancer, we've already touched on that. Blood clots and stomach ulcers, damage to unborn babies. So you find that unborn babies will be born with certain birth defects because tobacco is cancerous. And the baby, you would find that certain babies, especially if they are twins, you find that the twins are sort of conjoined twins. The baby is born with some form of hydrocephaly, like an enlarged head, or even retardation syndrome, where the baby hasn't fully developed mentally. Shortness of breath because of the carbon monoxide that's produced, that's binding to hemoglobin, colds, flu, and other infections, because these tend to reduce your immune system. Non-smokers inhale smoke, which makes them passive smokers. Deforestation due to the process of drying and curing tobacco, because tobacco farming actually requires large fields. So inhalants, we spoke about these. So inhalants are substances that include volatile solvents and gases. So volatile means they easily evaporate when exposed to heat. So examples of these substances, you can have glue, paint, nail polish, which is very toxic, petrol, Tipex, and rubber. These are usually, it's a common practice amongst teenagers and high school students because they can't afford to buy the actual drugs because they are dependents. So they will find other alternative means to get high. They'll start sniffing nail polish or glue or paint or some form of petrol. They are sniffed from an open container or a rag, like a cloth soaked in a substance. When the substance is inhaled, the lungs allow rapid absorption, hence it enters the brain and affects it. Like I mentioned earlier, the brain has got a blood-brain barrier, so the effects can be felt in the nervous system. So effects: high blood pressure, a headache, slurred and sluggish speech, and loss of motor coordination. So someone's gait or the way they walk will be sort of sluggish. So rash around the nose and mouth because you are inhaling these substances and they actually have an effect on the cells, the skin cells, the epithelial lining of the mouth and nose. Violent behavior because the nervous system has been disturbed. Unpredictable behavior, memory impairment, abnormalities of liver and kidney because these are the two organs that work very hard to eliminate toxins in the body. Red, glassy, watery eyes, distorts perception of time and space, and also leads to certain mental disorders such as schizophrenia. Drugs. We've been talking about drugs, so we can continue. So a drug is any substance which changes the chemistry of the body and affects the natural balance of the mind and the emotions. So remember what I told you, this is actually called the mechanism of action of a drug, how it works. It's going to affect a certain part of the body. It's going to make that certain part of the body react in a certain way in response to that stimulus of the drug. Drugs can either be natural or synthetic chemicals. Natural drugs are those found in certain plants such as caffeine, THC, tetrahydrocannabinol. To be specific, it's actually delta-9 tetrahydrocannabinol found in cannabis, nicotine found in tobacco, and some of them can be synthetic, like those manufactured, like Panadol, aspirin, and other NSAIDs like morphine. So cannabis, very, very popular, very arguably, because it's now being used as medicinal marijuana. So you would actually find that it has a wide array of medical applications. So cannabis, this is a hard brown material or a herbal mixture that comes from cannabis plants. So it's a plant and is illegal in Zambia. So it's an illicit drug in Zambia. Found drug trafficking cannabis, you'll be arrested. Therefore, when Zambians are found with it, it's a criminal offense. The drug has many street names like draw, brew, weed, hash, pot, gang, ganja, shish. But in Zambia, it's locally called chamba. So the psychoactive ingredient, the one that actually produces those hallucinogenic, euphoric effects, is the delta-9 tetrahydrocannabinol. So marijuana. There are actually laboratory tests that you can use to test whether someone is under the influence of this same drug, this marijuana. or even alcohol. So you can do something called gas chromatography that can actually identify the active ingredients, THC, and actually say, all right, in this patient's bloodstream, we actually found THC. So this person is under or was under the influence of this illicit drug at the time. So marijuana, so it comes from derived seeds, flowers, or stems of the cannabis plant. It has a concentration of delta-9 tetrahydrocannabinol of about 0 to 12%. So hashish, also called a resin form of marijuana, is like a dark stick of the plant. It's from the resin. It contains THC levels of about 12 to 18%. So it actually has a little bit higher levels of THC. So hashish oil, so sometimes cannabis can actually be formed in an oil. So made from compressed in hashish to produce oil using a solvent, very high concentration, just one drop, you're gone. So 18 to 25% are THC levels. Unlike all other drugs, cannabis also has some of its effects. So it makes certain users feel exhausted, somewhat sleepy, affects memory loss, concentration, as well as coordination. So people can lose they call it spatial senses. You can actually lose sense of time and space. Affects the reproductive system by reducing sperm count in males and irregular menstrual cycles in females. Some of these are just lies because you actually need proper studies. You can't just blame one thing there are a lot of things that can actually reduce sperm count, which are usually genetic and hormonal. And there are certain things that can actually produce irregular menstrual cycles in females, which are also genetic as well as hormonal. So some of these things are wrong. So causes cancer. Tobacco causes cancer, but cannabis, there aren't so many studies which actually link a specific form of cancer to cannabis use unless tobacco smoking. So whoever wrote this book is very biased to the science of cannabis. Makes the user paranoid and anxious. This one is very true. Makes the user talkative, somewhat. Okay, let's just say for now, follow this book. But in the general sense, I'll just leave, this is so wrong, but I'll leave this in the realm of social sciences, because civic education is not a science. So just memorize this, but 90% of this is wrong. So let's move on to heroin. Heroin is actually a vasoconstrictor, so it's actually going to constrict your veins, but it does have the effect to cause somewhat of a euphoric state in the users. So it's a brown or white speckled powder made from juice extract from an unripe capsule of the poppy plant. So poppy plant. The seed capsule of the green opium produces a milky juice or a latex from which many drugs can be made, such as morphine, as well as codeine. Because these drugs, heroin, actually reduces the breathing receptors for inhalation and exhalation, causing this sort of numbing feeling. So it actually, no wonder codeine actually stops people from coughing, because it acts on those receptors that help you breathe. No wonder this can actually be dangerous when it causes vasoconstriction. So heroin is formed through a chemical process of modifying morphine, known as acetylation, an organic process. Morphine is used to ease severe pain. However, it is dangerous when it is used improperly. Like I told you, it depresses the breathing receptors. Heroin is mainly taken by smoking, sniffing, injecting into veins. So it can be taken. Okay, so let me share the screen once more. We lost connection there. Okay, so like I said, heroin can be taken by smoking, sniffing, injecting into veins, so gas, liquid, and solid. The street names for heroin are brown sugar, smack, skate, or horse. So let's talk about some of the effects of heroin. Causes death due to overdose. So not really. Okay. Signs, symptoms, this isn't a medical book. So causes death due to overdose. Irregular menstrual cycles in women, damages hearts and the kidneys, causes mood swings, causes depression, loss of appetite, distorts the understanding of things, disturbs the pattern of nerve activity. Know these effects. So let's talk about cocaine. So cocaine is a white powder made from leaves of the coca plant. It is one of the oldest drugs. Cocaine is very ancient, used even in religious ceremonies for meditation and an aid to communicating with nature. So we can actually say it gave rise to even certain forms of religion, like, nature worshiping, sun worshiping. The leaves of the coca plant, when chewed, can relieve fatigue as well as hunger. So it actually causes some form of loss of appetite. However, cocaine is usually smoked, and it can be injected into the blood. It can also be orally taken by mixing with a liquid or in a capsule. Coca-Cola, though it's a myth, it may be true. Coca-Cola is actually said to have initially contained a very small quantity of cocaine before it was removed in 1903. So it may still be there, who knows? No wonder these drinks are a bit addictive. So street names: Coke, Charlie, Snow Lady, Dust. So certain effects of cocaine: dry mouth, it's usually injected. So sweating, severe loss in digestion, exhaustion, and lack of sleep. Lack of sleep is called insomnia. A transmission of HIV through sharing of needles. Death due to overdose. Ulceration of the nasal passage because it's snorted. Irregular menstrual cycles for women, heart and blood pressure, circulation problems. Over alertness and elevated moods. So you would find that if you examine someone's eyes and look at their pupils will be very dilated, and the body will just they'll look like over alert. So one has to ask themselves, what are some of the reasons why human beings tends to indulge in illicit drugs? So the first reason is just curiosity, just try it. You're young, you're free-spirited, so you want to experience new things and new sensations. You know that you only live once gone, so just curiosity. Peer pressure, the influence of friends, the influence of being young and trying to experiment. Just because your friends are doing it, you might be tempted to do it also, because you might look uncool if you are not doing that. So the lack of education, so some form of ignorance. Certain people can actually say, I've been smoking tobacco for over 50 years. I've seen someone who's 90 years still smoking tobacco and they're healthy. So they'll end up continuing to take those illicit drugs. Stress, probably the number one reason why people take illicit drugs, because the world is stressful, the state of the economy, work-life balance, people are stressed and they tend to use illicit drugs as a way to alleviate stress. Availability of substances, these substances are readily available, and when the supply is readily available, it's very easy to abuse those substances. Isolation disorders like alienation, where someone's not feeling like they belong, so they will take comfort in illicit drugs. Unemployment, having a lot of work to do is just as dangerous as having too little to do, because it can equally be as stressful, and to alleviate that stress, you tend to use drugs. A lack of recreational activities, you need other things to keep you busy. Without other recreational activities to pass the time, you would actually just tend to let's just chill by that building, the top of that building, and just smoke. So because there is no recreational activities. Enhancement of self-confidence and performance, because certain of these drugs can actually reduce anxiety, reduce the forms of fear, and some people actually even say it helps them study. So these are some of the reasons why people can actually be taking illicit drugs. So signs and symptoms of substance abuse, a sudden change in personality. You'll find that this person was like very lively, but they become sort of distant, a little bit aggressive, with a lot of mood swings. Academic performance sort of declines, especially when they start becoming addicted to those drugs. Dissociation disorder, staying away from the family, poor manner choice, a heavy use of perfumes to disguise, those substances, loss of appetite, wearing sunglasses because you just always look tired and exhausted. And also being in the possession of things like pill boxes, needles, small glass bottles, so that you can cut the cocaine and snort it easily. So these are some of the signs and symptoms of drug abuse. So how are you supposed to avoid these illicit drugs? So the easiest way is just to avoid. It's by not starting to take those illicit drugs. So you can say no, thank you. When somebody gives you a substance or a drug, though not easy to do because of the sociological factors surrounding that no thank you answer, when you've been found in a certain social event that contains illicit drugs. You can give a reason or an excuse saying, oh, maybe I've got asthma or bronchitis, so I can't smoke. You can divert the subject You can simply walk away, like say, I'm just tired, let me just go home. Avoiding the situation where substances are abused, avoid completely. Associating with non-users, keep busy, have some recreational activities, proper leisure time, keep your mind busy. So sometimes people get dependent on drugs, and when you become dependent on drugs, that's when it starts to have an impact on your livelihood. So when somebody entirely depends on substances, the situation is called addiction or dependence, where now it's starting to affect your social life. You can't go for work, you can't keep proper work-life balance or maintain your relationships. Now it goes in the realm of addiction. Substance addiction can either take physical or psychological forms. Physical forms, physical dependence is when one tries to withdraw using a substance but faces physical effects, literally shivering, tremors. That's alcohol withdrawal symptoms, sorry. While psychological effects is where one experiences things like anxiety, depression due to withdrawal of that abused substance. Some substance users can only feel an effect when they take very large doses because their body, their receptors have become trained and they're now used to that small dose. So you keep on increasing the dose, keep on increasing the dose. The body becomes tolerant. So impact of substance on the society, because the society at large, productivity of citizens is going to, become compromised. So we have to be able to study the society effects. At the individual level, an abuser of a substance is likely to have health problems resulting from the effects of this substance taken. Owing to poor health, the victim may affect working and studying culture. Like I mentioned, the victim may not have support from their loved ones, like due to overdependence, the substance abuser uses a lot of money. So these disorders, let me just tell you one thing, they can be treated. So you just have to identify that this person has a substance use disorder and give them proper help without judging them, because addiction is a real problem in society. At the family level, substance abusers tend to neglect their families and their priority to acquire the substance because it's a disorder. It's not that they want to, but it's because they've reached a point where they just can't help it. They need help. As a result, they end up stealing from friends and families and have more credit with some other family members. This teaches young ones in the family to start abusing them also. Uncle this uses this. You just find that a kid has started using drugs also. Community and national levels, some substance abusers commit crimes like murder and robbery to acquire more money to support their drug addiction. So because they can't function in society, they can't keep a job, they'll tend to crime, robbery, so that they can have enough money to maintain their addictions. Others may be involved in prostitution and drug trafficking. These illegal activities have a negative impact on the community and the nation at large. Certain drugs need, like the liquids, need needles to be delivered to the bloodstream, leading to the spread of HIV and other sexually transmitted diseases. It causes accidents and violence behavior. You just find that, okay, this person killed their spouse because they were under the influence of an illicit drug. So on an international level, drug trafficking, multi-billion dollar industry. It refers to the illegal manufacturing and selling of drugs, maybe even in someone's basement. Money laundering is common in drug trafficking. If they usually follow each other. For example, some drug traffickers use money obtained illegally and destabilize government through corruption, intimidation, violence, and buying votes. So it even now enters the governance arena. Money laundering affects the economy of a nation by causing inflation, like what's happening currently, but it was worse in the previous government anyway. Therefore, the drug and the substance users negatively have affected societies at international levels due to drug trafficking, as well as money laundering to support their addictions. So what can the community do to abolish or actually limit substance abuse? So abolishing of cultivation of drug crops such as marijuana, make it a crime or make it heavily taxed so that no ordinary citizen, excuse me, such that no ordinary citizen will be allowed to actually grow that crop commercially, even locally. Educating the people on the effects of substance abuse and the need to control the use of these substances anyhow. Taking an interest in one's community, if you love your community, you seek to protect it and help people. Employment, like what the current government is trying to do. If more people are empowered with work, they'll have things to do. They'll be less stressed about money and finances, meaning it will be harder for them to relieve their stress through use of certain drugs. Changing people's attitudes towards substance abuse through entertainment such as poems. So this is now called community mobilization and community education campaigns. Establishing groups and clubs. This may be things like anti-drug abuse clubs and community rehabilitation centers, which control substance abuse in Zambia, proper counseling services. Government has enacted, so what's Zambia doing? So government has enacted the law under Act number 37 of 1993 to prohibit trafficking, exporting, possessing, cultivating, manufacturing, and use of narcotic and psychotropic substances. The public is sensitized on the dangers of substance abuse and the illegal implication. Drug abuse is liable for punishment by imprisonment for a period not exceeding 10 years if found guilty. So between 1 to 10 years. The government of Zambia also works with other countries to exchange information on drug trafficking and related crimes in order to arrest offenders. In 1989, the government established the DEC, Drug Enforcement Commission. This commission is a government department charged with the responsibility of curbing substance abuse. For me, I feel like tobacco is the highest form of substance abuse. This commission has offices in all provinces in Zambia, with a national education campaign division. The division is responsible for releasing information, sensitizing the public, the community mobilization campaigns I spoke about. The department also works with non-governmental organizations and other government departments to rehabilitate victims of substance abuse. So you first identify victims of substance abuse before arresting them. Some NGOs involved are Piand Parental Association of Zambia, PPAZ, Youth Active, Young Women's Christian Association, Young Men's Christian Association, Society for Family Mental Health, Churches Sports in Action, Youth Media, Trendsetters. So this has been the topic of drug abuse in Zambia. May come in MCQs, highly likely to come in your essay type of questions. So read this in detail. I'm going to prepare an exam guide that's going to help you answer some of these questions. So you watch the video, read the notes, and then use the exam guide. All right, I'll see you next week with topic 8 on civil society and media governance. Thanks for the support. Very long lecture. This has been Brainworks Education.